to allocute then?
We are, Your Honor.
All right, then I will note before we do, Ms. Monroe, in determining the appropriate sentence in this case, this court must consider a number of factors, including the seriousness of the offense that you've committed, your criminal history, the statutory penalty, the cost of confinement, the sentencing guidelines, the report and recommendation of the probation department, as well as what is and what will be stated on the record today. I'm going to give your attorney the opportunity to address the court first on your behalf. Once your attorney has addressed the court on your behalf, you will also have the opportunity to address the court if you wish, followed by the prosecution, and if there are any victims here who have come to address the court, they will be invited to do so as well. So with that said, Mr. Zaney, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just asked the court to recognize the filing of our sentencing memorandum in this case.
Yes, it has been received.
Thank you. And I know the court has reviewed that sentencing memorandum as the court commonly does. And I think what is often the challenge is to find the right words for every situation when presenting a client to the court. And I think we were best able to do that in the sentencing memorandum. I believe the sentencing memorandum, which we're going to ask the court to incorporate into its decision here today by virtue of our position, is one that takes into account all of the sentencing factors that the court should consider. I would remind the court, and I think you noted this was a no contest plea, which, as the court is aware, affects the, there's purposes for that and affects my client's ability to freely speak. And I think, though, we've captured the essence of remorse and recognition of the offense in the sentencing memorandum. At least that was our attempt. And I think we did a diligent job showing the court that. I think the sentencing memorandum, again, addresses all the sentencing factors that the court needs to take into account. And we're renewing our request for the court to accept the agreement between the prosecutor and defense in this case and sentence accordingly. And we would just rest on the fact that the information in that report has been reviewed by Ms. Monroe and is something that I think can ultimately be the best picture you can understand Ms. Monroe's situation from the time that this incident occurred to coming before the court today. So without any additional magical words, Your Honor, I think the court's left with the consideration of sentencing her to the Killebrew agreement or not.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Monroe, did you wish to address the court at all today?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. I would ask then that defense, Ms. Monroe, Mr. Zaney, Mr. Dobies be seated. I will call the prosecution up and ask if there are any individuals, any victims here who would like to address the court before we sentence.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, we have 10 people.
Thank you.
Over the past year and a half, my staff at my office and myself have had the honor of meeting and getting to know all the members of the family that were struck that day. And we've had to have the most impossible decisions with them about initial charges, if we should run a preliminary examination and ask Judge Clarizio at the time to send the case up on murder, if we should have a trial, consulting with them on what kind of offer, if any, should be extended to the defendant. And I want this court to know, even though today technically is about the sentencing of the defendant, that family over there has acted with nothing but grace and love and are truly an example of how families should treat each other when the unthinkable happens. I wish I'd never met these people under these circumstances. I really wish it had been other circumstances, because there are people there that are such good humans. And it really makes you wonder, and I've dealt with a lot of crime, a lot of horrific things that have happened to people in their lives. Why, when something like this happens, does it happen to people like that? And I thought of all the people, and I was taking note when they were speaking, of all the people there that day. A first grade teacher, a mom, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, a dad, a grandma, an aunt, a wife, a newlywed, an EMT firefighter, a young doctor, a military veteran, and people who loved each other. I was not there on May 18th, 2024, but I will tell you, I know you've just heard a lot of statements from a lot of people who were there. And I want them to know that there was another side that day, because when I first got the call as the on-call prosecutor that weekend, it was from a seasoned member of the Clinton County Sheriff's Office to tell me that this had just happened in Clinton County. And I have never, in 25 years of practicing law, 15 years of being a prosecutor, had an officer call me, and when they were telling me what happened, break down during that call. And the reason he broke down was because of the kids, the children that were there and saw what happened. And right in that moment, even though I didn't fully understand the magnitude of what was happening in our county, I knew that this was something so horrific that it had rattled someone with that seniority. The victims, their family, their friends, their supporters, their colleagues have shared so much with this court about who John and Dan were, about how their lives have been impacted. And there are some people who question the agreement for the 30-year minimum on this. And I know that was an impossible decision for the family of Dan and John to make. And I want to be clear that that is the minimum sentence. That is the Killebrew agreement. That is what we stand by today, that she not be eligible for parole for 30 years. And if, I hope she reflects on this, she understands that this isn't something that happened to her. This isn't something bad luck that happened to Ashley Monroe that day. That's not fate. That's not, none of that. This happened to them, not her. She made multiple choices that day, and although the drinking and driving has been mentioned multiple times, and that's certainly a large part of it here, because we know from her blood results that she was a .195. Keep in mind, we're not here on operating while intoxicated causing death. The primary plea here, which carries the maximum sentence that she can get today, is murder in the 2nd degree. And that is because choices were made here where this was foreseeable. This wasn't just operating while intoxicated causing death. This is drinking to a .195, along with the choice of being on medications that say not to drink at all. And even though they say not to drink at all, she didn't have 1 drink or 2 drinks. She drank to .195. It is the choice of driving in that car, getting behind the wheel, continuing to drive for about 2 miles down Wacusta Road, going off the road to the right, going into opposing traffic on the left in no passing zones over hilly areas, doing that multiple times and not making the right choice at any time to pull over her car and stop. I had the opportunity to go to the scene where all of our survivors and our victims were hit. I walked that scene, and what struck me the most looking at what's there is this is clearly a park area. This happened in daylight. This happened in a space where a driver would reasonably be able to see that going through that section of the roadway, they should be exercising reasonable caution based on what is on that road, what is around it. There was plenty of space to see. The number of people that were there, dressed in bright colors, standing there in the middle of the day. We have evidence from Monica Fabis that when she was coming towards the guardrail where this family stood, she wasn't even looking out her windshield. She was looking straight down. What was she doing? Some people have guessed maybe on a phone. Some people have guessed who knows what. But she wasn't looking at the road. So with medications, alcohol, not looking at the road, swerving all over the road, and not making a choice out of the multiple times she did that to pull over, she made choices. As one of the victims pointed out, multiple choices. And those choices took choices away from these good people back here. This isn't something that happened to her. It happened to them. And I have heard things about, of course, she doesn't have any convictions on her record for prior criminal acts. And I get that. I do. And I know the court has to consider that. But there is a difference here between intent and impact. And when the court looks at the snow factors, part of what the sentence has to be is deterrence. I don't have a time machine, I know this court certainly doesn't, to turn it back and bring Dan and John back, to bring back Jessica's leg, to bring back all the trauma they've been through. But the court can say to the community, this will not be tolerated because the sheer damage that it does to the citizens who live here, who visit here, who are here, there has to be a message sent to others in the community that when you make choices like the defendant did, the penalty is going to be severe. The consequences are going to be severe. 30 years probably isn't enough. It's not. But when you have these impossible conversations about going to trial with a jury and seeing what a jury does, it was the decision that was right at the time. I also want to say, after meeting this amazing family, that there may be things that they do not know from that day about miracles. And I do believe that in some situations when we have a case like this, we have to have accident reconstructionists who put together what happened and try to tell the prosecution or the court or the defense attorneys what exactly happened. And there were some miracles this day. One miracle I want to say is there was a person on scene who was one of the first people to stop. His name was Jeff Hinkle. He hasn't testified in anything so far. He's a member of the community. He was an off-duty EMT, and he stopped, and law enforcement told me that but for Mr. Hinkle, this would have been a worse situation than it was. Mr. Hinkle got out of his car, stopped, and immediately took control of the scene, even coming up to the first officer who arrived there and was able to tell him who needed treatment immediately and what was going on. The fact that he was the first person who just happened to stop that day is simply amazing. Second, defendant left the scene. We know from Gabe, who is the young man, you can't see him on our screen, but he's the young man in the group picture far to the left, that when she was driving away after hitting his family member, she had her hand over her mouth. She knew that she had just hit many people, and she kept going. She left them there, no better than trash, no better than roadkill, no better than a piece of litter she threw out her window. She put her own well-being, her own self-preservation among her fellow human beings who she just hurt. Perhaps the only way she was actually apprehended, and we know who did this, and we're able to be here today, is because of some miracle of the universe, 2 deputies from the Clinton County Sheriff's Office who were coming to the scene and were in the right place at the right time taking a route they normally actually wouldn't have taken but for the fact that one officer was training another, passed her vehicle on a 2-lane highway, going, I think they said about 100 miles per hour to try to get to the scene, and one of them, out of the corner of their eye, saw the far side of her windshield flash in the light and realized it was damaged. They immediately turned on that car and were able to stop her. And even after she was still going down that road when the deputies found her, dropping pieces of her car along the road, driving off the road still, they were able to identify her and connect her to this horrible event that just happened. The fact that they were where they were off their route is amazing. Another miracle. A lot of times, unfortunately, with these kind of incidents, we don't have witnesses who are not involved who saw what happened. I want the court to be aware that there were people, even though defendant didn't stop, there were people minding their own business that day at the park or near the park that came and did everything they could. Several people who were there, I think one was kayaking, had just finished kayaking, stopped and gave statements to police. They came and testified at the preliminary hearing. These people who also, based on the horrific nature of what they witnessed because they saw the impact, are also going through their own counseling. They didn't walk away. In fact, the humanity of Miss Temez, she saw Jennifer Evans, who was our first speaker, get launched. Jennifer went the farthest out of all the victims. She was sent away from the group. And her first thought was to get to Jennifer because she was worried that no one else, that the first responders wouldn't know that she was over there that far. And when she testified and when I spoke to her, she said exactly what Jennifer said. The first thing when Jennifer became conscious was she asked about her little girls. Who are those 2 little girls in the bottom right corner who by some miracle are alive? I don't think Jennifer remembers this because I think she was in shock, but Natalia was there encouraging her to stay awake during that time while everyone else was with the main group. I also want to thank Leanne Miller, who testified at the prelim, who was in the car behind the defendant, who testified about what she observed. She also stopped her car. Miss Miller, the first person that Miss Miller saw was little Ivan, who you can't see on here, but in the group picture, he is the little boy being held by Jessica. He was the only family member who was still in the road. Everyone else got thrown over the guardrail. Ivan was still on the side of the road by himself. She went to him and comforted him, a 3-year-old face down, offering him water, trying to put something under his head, take care of him. His dad had just been killed, unbeknownst to her, and his mom didn't even know if she was going to survive. The 2 biggest miracles of that day. Number 1 is that Jessica Harris survived. When this case first came out, and I was evaluating the law regarding second-degree murder for John and Dan, there was a time when the people were thinking this may be 3 murder counts. And whatever strength of will is in that woman brought her through the immense pain, suffering, and injuries to survive for those children so that they didn't lose both parents that day. And then finally, although I didn't know John or Dan, when I listened to the statements of their loved ones, and when I read, I know we gave you multiple other letters, Your Honor, from other people who loved, knew, and cared about these 2 men. The fact that statistically, based on the people that were in that group, most of them were children. The fact that we are not here on murder charges for children is simply astounding from a statistical standpoint. And maybe it's a miracle, but I also know after listening to what these two men are, that if two people had to die that day, it wasn't going to be a kid, and it wasn't going to be who they loved. And so when I hear their loved ones talk about them being protectors and caring about other people, I can almost guarantee you, without knowing them, that they would have been the two first people to sacrifice themselves for the rest of their family. And so it's not lost on me that the two people that were lost out of this incident are these two men, because they would have given that for them. I want to thank all the police jurisdictions, because as I prepared this case and talked to the officers who, as John's department pointed out, they worked very hard on this case. One officer told me, in fact, that he will never forget this case, because as soon as the call came out that multiple people were injured, that it was a fatality, and that there were a lot of kids involved, that the radio did not stop beeping with all the departments from all the areas who started coming lights and sirens to help. And he said, I will never forget that. You couldn't get through. There wasn't a department in the area that was not on their way to provide help for this family. All in all, it doesn't change that John and Dan are gone. It doesn't change the injuries and the sentence that this family has gotten, that they were sentenced to on May 18th. But we ask that you send the message to the community that defendant be held responsible for her choices that day, because this was murder, that she be responsible for the number of lives she's impacted that will carry on, as someone pointed out, generationally for this side and this side. That even though today might be the last day of the court proceedings before you, it's not the last day for this family. And we ask that, Your Honor, you follow the Killebrew Agreement, that she be sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, with the top of that number to be set by Your Honor, but we ask that it be no less than 60 years.
Ms. Martinez, I have a question
Sure.
for you. I just want to make sure that my math is correct, because I know this was a carefully crafted
Correct.
plea agreement between the prosecution and the defense. So as to the, and I'm looking at the homicide murder second degree guidelines, I read 225 months to 375 months to life. So my calculations indicate that would be on the lowest end 18 years and approximately 18 3/4 years.
Correct.
So 18 years and about 9 months. And then on the higher end of the minimum guidelines, that would be 31.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be, so the 30-year would be within the properly
Correct.
scored guidelines, and I don't think there was any dispute.
Correct.
All right, and that was, okay, I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.